Welcome to the Unpacking the Framework video series. This series provides valuable information about the National Best Practice Framework for Early Childhood Intervention. My name is Denise Luscombe, and this video introduction is being recorded on Whadjuk Noongar Budja. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and the land you're listening from, and recognise their continued connection to country, waterways and community. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. This video is one of a series that describes the evidence and practice information that underpins the principles of the National Best Practice Framework for Early Childhood Intervention. You will hear from both national and international speakers throughout this video series. This video covers child-centred, a key principle of the National Best Practice Framework for Early Childhood Intervention, and is presented by our national speakers Rachel Parker and Alice Ghazarian. Rachel is the Voice of the Child Foundation's lead in the Centre for Community Child Health at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. Rachel is an experienced senior researcher in early years education and wellbeing. Prior to joining Murdoch Children's Research Institute, Rachel worked with the Australian Council for Educational Research for over 10 years, leading an agenda to improve children's experiences of learning through play. She recently established Global Play Lab, a collective of like-minded leaders passionate about creating systems that support children to thrive and achieve. Alice is the Voice of the Child implementation lead at the Centre for Community Child Health at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. Alice has over 10 years' experience as an evaluator and facilitator, supporting organisations, service systems and communities to use and generate evidence to improve services and conditions for children and families.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Alice, and I'm here with my colleague Rachel, and we're joining you from Wurundjeri country. Today, we're diving into one of the most foundational principles in the framework, child-centred practice.
Thanks, Alice. Let's start by talking through the principle itself, what it is and why it matters, before launching into some examples of what it looks like and doesn't look like in everyday practice.
This principle is all about recognising children as active participants in their own lives. It's about supporting their engagement, learning, development, participation, and well-being, not just in theory, but in every interaction, every decision, and every goal we set with them and their families.
That's right, Alice. And what I love about this principle is that it's underpinned by children's rights, the right to be heard, to be safe, to play, to learn, and be affirmed for who they are. It's not just about what we do for children, but what we do with them. That includes recognising their voice, their agency, and their preferences, even when they're very young and communicate in different ways.
Exactly. And when we say voice, we don't just mean verbal communication. It's about both agency and autonomy. Agency is the ability to act for oneself, a skill that children develop over time as they learn to make choices and take initiative. Autonomy, on the other hand, is about having the opportunity to make those choices, being given the space and support to decide what matters to them and to express themselves in their own way. Whether that's through spoken language, gestures, alternative communication, or play, it all counts. What matters is that they're empowered to participate in ways that are meaningful to them.
And it's also about recognising their strengths and interests. Too often, especially in interventions, we focus on deficits. That is what a child can't do. But child-centred practice flips that. It asks, what can a child do? What do they enjoy? What motivates them? To recap, the child-centred principle is all about supporting children's engagement, learning, development, participation and well-being, recognising children's voice, agency and decision-making, focusing on strengths, interests and preferences, and ensuring children's rights to learn, contribute and be safe. Now let's look at why this principle is so important.
There's a strong body of research that tells us how critical the early years are. Responsive, nurturing relationships and rich learning experiences in the early years lay the foundation for everything that follows. Emotional well-being, social skills, motivation to learn, and academic success. And it's not just about structured learning. Children learn best through play, through everyday routines, and through interactions with people they trust. That's why it's so important to embed learning in authentic settings, at home, in early learning centres, in the community. When we follow a child's lead and build on their interests, we're not just teaching, we're creating a sense of safety, belonging, and joy.
Exactly. And when we talk about child-centered practice, we are also talking about inclusion. Every child, regardless of their diagnosis, background, or ability, deserves to be seen and heard and supported in ways that are meaningful to them. That means recognizing that children develop at their own pace, and there is no single right way to think, learn, and behave. It can be helpful to reflect on questions like, what can the child do? What do they enjoy? What sparks their curiosity or excitement? These are often the best starting points. When children are engaged in something meaningful to them, they're more likely to be curious and maintain focus. For example, a child might have great auditory memory. They might be able to pick up songs quickly or remember stories. These skills can be used as the foundation to build other competencies like early numeracy or planning and organisation.
Let's talk a bit more about what this principle actually looks like in everyday practice. It looks like observing children closely, listening to what they're telling us through their words, their actions, their play. It looks like involving them in decisions, even small ones, and respecting their preferences. It looks like adapting environments and routines so that every child can participate in a way that feels natural and empowering. And it also means being mindful of how we communicate. For some children, that might mean using Auslan, a communication device, or other forms of augmented or alternative communication. For others, it might mean slowing down, giving them time to respond, or using visual supports. The key is to meet every child where they are.
And just as importantly, it's about how we partner with families. Families know their children best. When we work alongside them, co-designing goals, embedding learning in daily routines, and sharing strategies, we create consistency and meaning across all areas of a child's life. There's a helpful resource that has been specifically developed for early child intervention practitioners called Looks Like, Doesn't Look Like. It sits within the National Best Practice Framework if you want more information, but here's a very high-level summary. For example, child-centered practice looks like identifying activities children enjoy and using those as a foundation for learning. It doesn't look like focusing only on deficits or using activities that aren't fun or functional. It looks like developing goals with the child and family that build on strengths. It doesn't look like setting goals that are purely about fixing problems. It looks like creating opportunities for peer interaction, not just adult-led activities, because relationships with other children are so important for identity and social development.
So, how do we know when we're getting it right? We see children forming secure, trusting relationships with their family, with peers, with educators. We see them developing cognitive and social and emotional skills, building confidence, and expressing themselves in ways that are meaningful to them. We also see them engaging in daily life, playing, learning, participating in routines, and we see them connecting with their culture and community, which is such a vital part of identity and well-being.
So if you're not sure whether your practice is child-centered, ask yourself, how might the child experience this activity? Whose interests are being honoured? And is this experience building the child's sense of self and belonging? In addition to asking yourself, ask children. Consider ways you can engage children in learning design, providing feedback, and seeking their input. And here's just one example of how we're doing this at the Centre for Community Child Health. Alongside our colleagues at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute and in partnership with children, we developed the Voice of the Child Toolkit as a resource to support researchers, clinicians, and service providers, and anyone else who contributes to the health and education systems and services that children use. The toolkit includes principles, processes, and methods to involve children and young people in the decisions that affect them. It is relevant to children of all ages and includes advice on age-specific approaches, and it has been recently released for public use on our website.
The next phase of this project involves working with communities and with children aged 3 to 12 to test the toolkit in practical settings. Over the next year, we will partner with 3 community health settings in Victoria, and over the next 3 years, we will partner with 5 early childhood education and care settings across Australia. Through this work, we want to support services in gathering insights from children. If there's a particular challenge they are facing either as a community or within the service, to use these insights to shape solutions. With educators, we will also be co-designing and testing capacity building resources that sit alongside the toolkit and support professionals to implement it themselves. We'll be using learnings from our research to make continuous improvements to the toolkit. To wrap up, child-centred practice is about more than just good intentions. It's about deliberate, responsive and respectful action. It's about seeing children as capable, curious and full of potential, and making sure our practices reflect that belief.
We hope this conversation has given you some ideas and inspiration, maybe even a moment to pause and reflect on your own practice. What's one small change you could make to centre a child's voice more fully? Thanks for joining us, and don't forget, this is just one part of the framework. There are other principles that build on and support this one, and we encourage you to explore those too.
We hope you've enjoyed this video, part of the video series Unpacking the Framework for the National Best Practice Framework for Early Childhood Intervention. The review of best practice in early childhood intervention was commissioned by the Department of Social Services. Led by the University of Melbourne, the project team included Pracy, professionals and researchers in early childhood intervention, Murdoch Children's Research Institute, SNAKE, National Voice for Our Children, Children and Young People with Disability Australia, and ACD, Advocating for Children with Disability. Coordination and production of the video series was led by Pracy.